resilience is not a tool that comes out when life is great and everything is wonderful. Resilience is precisely a tool that gets forged in the reality of human adversity and pain.
Hello and welcome to the Wellness Dojo Podcast, where we bring real solutions to real health and wellness problems. Today, I'm joined by Abe Brown, the coach of coaches, where we talk about Abe's incredible journey through life and how you too can rewrite your story to create the life that you want. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's get into it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Dojo Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Craik, and I'm really excited today to share another very special guest. This man is an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, a speaker, and a leader of leaders. He's known as the coach's coach. Thanks so much for being here, and welcome, Mr. Abe Brown.
Hey, thanks so much, Kyle. I appreciate what you said. Nice to hear that, those kind words. And I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast. It's just awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Did I miss anything in the intro that's really important?
I wouldn't say. I mean, hey, we got a little bit of time together, so I'm sure it'll come out at the right time,
Perfect. Just like I said, you're the coach's coach. You help leaders become high performance leaders. And that started somewhere. And I know you have a really incredible and inspiring story. Can you talk just a little bit about your journey to, from even as far as like childhood all the way to just becoming a coach and helping other people make the most of their lives?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, our coaching model is built around, the science of human flourishing, which captures, obviously high performance. It captures a growth mindset. It captures, the capacity to be resilient. And I think for me, long before that was academic or clinical, it was personal. So we were very sad, I guess you could say, but really turned out quite well. My mother was quite young when she had my brother, and she was 16 when she got pregnant, and then ended up having him when she was 17, and that necessitated dropping out of school. And then a couple of years later, I came along, when by the time she was 19, and then my dad took off. And my brother and I, we have two different dads. And so, there was already a lot of chaos because this was the early 1970s, and I'm not saying that the services and supports from a social perspective are perfect now, but they weren't as good as they are today. And so we kind of ended up in some real precarious positions because my mother's parents weren't very happy with her. So we ended up, kind of in, very vulnerable situations where she ended up with these men who were quite abusive. And, it's a horrible thing for a woman, a mother, to have to choose, between homelessness and enduring extreme abuse in order to look after her kids. But that was the choice that she made. And I think that it not only impacted her, but it impacted my brother and I. So we had a lot of, moments of abuse, memories of abuse, situations where, primarily physical, a lot of, beatings and, being kicked and punched and thrown against walls and things like that. And, I think that for my brother and I think it's true for him too, we kind of thought this was normal. We didn't really have any other, if you want to use the term reference point, it's not like, we had studied or read about family systems or structures. And, but I do remember the most painful part of that, listening to the sound of my mother being abused. And, those are things that stick with you for a lifetime. And a lot of the anguish that she felt, because, I guess one could say she made mistakes or not, depending on how one would define early age pregnancy. But, certainly nothing that would deserve what she experienced. And so, I think I probably learned something about resilience first from her. Resilience is not a tool that comes out when life is great and everything is wonderful. Resilience is precisely a tool that gets forged in the reality of human adversity and pain. And I think so many times we have this idea that people who are raised in abusive or poverty-stricken environments, that oh, that let's have some sympathy for them, poor them. But I guess having been raised in that, and I got my first job when I was 7 to help put food on the table. It's not like we had any money. And a lot of the time we would go without. But I also think that pain is an opportunity. And I know that sounds crazy, but one of the things I will always say to people is that pain is mandatory, but misery is optional. I just think that pain is a part of the human journey. It's always been that way, and I think it always will be. I actually think that the quest for a pain-free life is really dumb, because it's not possible. But if you look at it, almost everything beautiful comes out of pain. But the question is, are you going to allow misery to take over? Because once misery, and that's a choice, right? Once misery takes over, you're done. And so, that's, I guess, a little bit, at least, of the backstory. Of course, my career, from a professional perspective, I was really blessed, I guess you could say. I was on a path to prison by the time I was in my teenage years. And I use the term blessed because when I was 16, I had this spiritual experience that really changed my life. I was breaking into houses and stealing cars and selling drugs and doing a lot of the things. And it's not a light thing to say. My brother, actually, I was on the same path as him, and he's actually done over a decade of prison here in Canada. And so, the path that I was on was taking me, I think, somewhere pretty destructive. I had this experience that came and changed my life. And, all of a sudden that opened up, mental and emotional real estate to say that maybe things could be different. Maybe my life could be different. Maybe I didn't have to repeat all of the mistakes that, I guess I felt like I had done to me. And, so my career started, I did 13 years. I was a pastor and also a registered therapist for about 9 or 10 of those years. And then, strangely, because, the dysfunction that you don't deal with, it ultimately deals with you. I actually ended up having my first marriage breakdown while I was in this job, especially if you're quote unquote a person of the cloth, you need to be nearly perfect. And I was never nearly perfect. And so here I found my own marriage ended. And I was then again almost re-traumatized, I guess you could say, because a lot of this dysfunction of not learning or understanding healthy relationships now had come out and repeated it in my own life. And so at that point, I had a real choice to make. I think that there's a surface level of growth that I had experienced, in my 20s, as I had that spiritual experience in my teenage years and then went into that profession. I just felt called to help people. But, I think that surface level growth needed to go deeper because the things that, I had experienced had gone pretty deep, as you can imagine. I mean, literally my neural pathways had been formed in the furnace of trauma. And so, there needed to be some deep work to do that rewiring, which I really hadn't done. I think, I had done a lot to clean up on the outside, but maybe not so much on the inside. And so, I went through this process, this was in my early 30s, and almost like a rebirth or retooling, a complete restructuring. I mean, maybe the best way to think about it is I had to gut my house, my mind, do a complete reno. And of course, along the way, went into business and then went into nonprofit leadership at the executive levels and then into coaching. And so it's been a pretty crazy journey, but it's been awesome. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, that's woo. It's quite the journey you've been on, eh? Like, wow. And like, I just love this idea of like rewriting your story as well. I think that's such an important thing. Regardless of the level of trauma that you've been through, because we all experience different levels of trauma, right? Like maybe it's actual physical abuse like you've experienced and some of these other traumas, or maybe it's something that, maybe appears a little bit smaller in the grand the grand scheme of things. but we all experience it. We all have an opportunity. You mentioned choice. Like, we have a choice when we have pain, we have a choice when we have failure and all these different things. And just choosing to rewrite that story is something that's just so fascinating to me, and so powerful to hear a story like that. So thank you. And thanks for diving in deep there. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You mentioned something that kind of sparked my interest, which was you mentioned like this kind of like surface level fix almost that you had gone through. It's like you said, I kind of fixed it on the outside, but not on the inside. Can you speak to that a little bit, and how, because I think a lot of people do that, where you kind of put a band-aid over some of your problems and then you move on to the next day and it's like, yeah, today's better. That's great. But what is it about getting to the real root of things that really helps people?
Yeah, I love that question. And the best way I can describe it is, if you don't mind, because I know you're a fitness expert, I'm not, but I'll tell you a little bit that might help people kind of put it together. At least it helped me. For years I had been a person who exercised every day.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, when I say every day, I mean it like at least 6 days a week, and very consistent. And so I would sort of vacillate in my weight again through my 30s and 40s. I'm 49 years old now. And I remember it was actually in the summer when the pandemic first happened, July of 2020, kind of looking in the mirror one day and saying, holy crap, like this, I am not liking what I see. Even though there had been lots of times over the years when I had gone up and down from a weight perspective and from an overall fitness perspective. And it was in that moment that I made a decision. I'm going to get healthy. And so I actually did a program, you probably heard of it, called 75 Hard. And over the 75 days, I literally lost 40 pounds of fat. I got my body fat down to about 9%, 8%. And 2.5 years later, I actually have maintained that. And I still have a modified version going of 75 Hard. I mean, to live that way is too crazy, but it was a deep dive. But what I did that allowed it to be sustainable was my mindset shift needed to occur.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the problem I think we do, like, people dabble in self-help. Oh, I'm going to learn a little bit about leadership. I'm going to learn a little bit about personal growth. I'm going to learn a little bit about the law of attraction, or like whatever they're into, right? Because people are into all kinds of stuff. But, the reality is, depending on the architecture of your dysfunction, I mean, if you're pretty severely dysfunctional, which I was, I needed more than a little dabble do ya. I needed to go and actually do a deep dive. And the biggest thing that changes your life is when your mindset shifts. So here I am on my fitness journey 3 years later. My mindset has shifted, and I know that this is a sustainable change. In the other areas, what I allowed to occur was a real mindset shift. And mindset work is tough, right? Because we as human beings, we tend to the negative, right? That's not a judgment. I do it too.
Yep.
We will always go to the bad news before the good news. We'll always look for what's wrong rather than what's right. We always lean into weakness rather than strength. And so what you need is a systematized process. And for me, what that process was a daily routine that really began with a few things. Every day, I want to get up. I want to make sure I manage my mission. I want to make sure I manage my moments. I want to manage my mindset, manage my mood, manage my motivation, and manage my mantras. And when I think about that, I know it's a lot of M's there. I love M&Ms, especially with the peanuts, but I haven't had them for a little while. But nonetheless, not that that's bad, but I just haven't had a chance to. But I think if you can manage those things on a daily basis, set yourself up for success. I really believe that if you master your mornings, you'll master your life. And
Yep.
I think so many people just hop out of bed because hey, we're all busy, and life is full of pressure, and it's not like we lack discipline. As a matter of fact, we might be too disciplined. It just might be that we're disciplined about some of the wrong things. And if we just shifted the focus of our discipline a little bit, we could go deeper. And for a lot of us, they say, well, I got all this trauma. Don't you understand? I need a therapist. Yeah. Go do the heart work, but the heart work will not be sustainable if you don't do the head work.
Hmm.
So one of the things I say, and I say, because I was a therapist, I would say to people, if my heart is worth healing, my heart is worth protecting.
Hmm.
And the only way I protect my heart is by protecting my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple things that jump out at me there is like, first, this term of like life coach jumps out, right? And I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and they asked me like, so like, what kind of coaching are you doing mostly now? And I had a hard time answering, right? Because like what you're saying, you to say like I'm a fitness coach, it doesn't really capture what I do the same way. I'm sure, if you were to try and isolate what you do to like one specific thing, it just doesn't work, because it's this term of life coach, although it's kind of like a buzz or a fluff word now, like
Yeah.
really like that, there's no coaching that's not life coaching, in my opinion, because you have to really get to this surface, like beyond this surface level,
Yeah.
to really make any kind of real change happen, right? And
Right
it's going
on.
to be hard, it's going to hurt.
It is going to hurt, but it's a good pain, right? It's the kind of pain that you get when you're in the gym, right? Where,
Yeah.
okay, I got to get through this, but hey, I'm going to see the gains, right? No pain, no gain, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that you said that really resonated, all those M's, all those manage, the word manage, right?
Yeah.
I think that's so important for people as well, because like you said, like, yeah, you can kind of say like, you can dabble in the self-help, and you can dabble in the fitness program or the diet or whatever. But until you find a way to really manage these things, right? I really believe that that's the difference. And I'll ask you the same question of like, is that the difference? Like, is the difference people finding a way to continually check in on these things, and not just say like, yeah, I went to therapy, I talked about it, and now I got that off my chest, I'm good. It's about that management, and like, okay, what do I do with that conversation now? How do I continue to come back to that conversation?
Yeah. I mean, and what's great is that there's been a lot of research on this, like our coaching model. And I know it's been a while since you and I connected, but since you did training with me, we've kind of retooled and redone the entire thing. Unbelievable change,
Hmm.
but and around the science of flourishing. And one of the things that's cool is that researchers actually identified that people who flourish have a ratio of about 3 to 1 positive to negative in terms of what they ruminate around, what they meditate on, what they think about. And it's not that you can't think about the negative. Of course, negative is a part of this world. We've already acknowledged that. But then where do I choose to direct my thoughts? Not in a denial or a suppressive way, but in a way that says I'm going to be intentional. And so, when I think about it, I think, okay, I had the first, 2 decades of my life was a lot of trauma. And so that means to counteract that, I need 3 times, triple the amount of positive. So
Hmm.
I'm still early in this journey. Do you know what I mean? I'm only 49. So what I mean is I got to just keep leaning in, and every day is a new opportunity. But again, if you master that morning, what happens is you start the process correctly. And again,
Yeah.
moving from, the science of flourishing to engineering, engineers, process engineers will tell you that if you can get the first 15% of any system or process right, then typically the other 85%, it's not that it takes care of itself, but you vastly increase the chances of
Yeah.
the success of that process completion. And so, hey, that's why I'm such a big fan of the morning. If I take control of the first 15% of my day, I've set the tone. But if I don't start my day right, then it becomes an entire effort to correct something that's not on the right track, and that is exhausting. So yeah, I'm with you. I mean, this is a lifetime journey, but just like fitness, when you start to tap into the gains, well, geez, I mean, hey, you never want to go back, right? I
Yeah.
mean, 5 years ago, I'd be sitting here eating that bowl of peanut M&Ms, and again, there's nothing wrong with that every so often, but I'd be doing that every couple of days.
Yeah.
And as great as that is, I wouldn't trade what I have now for that, because it's not replaceable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to acknowledge you've made a wicked transformation, man. We've been connected for a while, and that transformation that you've made, like, kudos. That's takes a lot of dedication to do what you've done. So
Well,
good
thanks,
job.
brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Um, I also talk a lot about just like building this foundation, right? I always say like, if you can build that foundation up first, doesn't matter if it's fitness, nutrition that comes next, but you can support these kind of habits that come next, right? You have to build that strong foundational layer. What's the biggest thing that you see that people struggle with, or the number one struggle that people have when trying to kind of set that foundation or build that foundation at the beginning?
What I've discovered, and I think you hit it earlier, is the story, right?
Mm,
And I think that the story that we tell ourselves is so important, you know?
yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, it's not about what's wrong with you, it's about what's right. But the problem is that we've been telling ourselves this story, many of us, for many decades. And again, if you come from that background of abandonment or emotional neglect or abuse or you know, whatever, that story is really, it's deep in your soul. So, you know, what I tell people, the starting point isn't, hey, just get disciplined, grit your teeth, and bang it out. Why don't we start with what's right? Why don't you start thinking about all of the exceptional things about you, right? What is working well for you? And then how about we build on that? And, you know, to give you an example, I'm a big fan of the mornings, but, you know, not everyone's a morning person.
Mm,
And so, you know, I say to people, well, you know, honor your body clock. And so if somebody says to me, like my mother almost has the exact opposite, I get up at 3 a.m. every day. She's often going to bed at 1 or 2 a.m. But that's because she's alert. Whereas me, 8:39, I'm ready for bed. Like it's just my body clock. And so what I say to people is, you know, if your body clock is that way, then just lean into that.
mm,
And but honor yourself by not beating yourself up and degrading yourself and calling yourself a failure and telling, you know, yourself that you never get it right. Build on what you have and be gentle with yourself, because in the end, you've got this. But if you don't think you've got this, then no one can coach you into it, right? I can't coach my client into a reality that their belief system hasn't embraced. I
yeah.
mean, it's just that simple. I wish I could. I've tried, you
Yeah.
know, but it hasn't worked yet, you know. So
Okay. I'm curious, as you talk about kind of that story and just like how you start to rewrite that story for yourself. How did that go for you in with your history, and like you said, like get it going down a path that was about to land you in prison? How did you start to turn that around? What was the story that you were telling yourself before you were able to make the change, and how did that story kind of change for yourself?
so there's one story I can tell you that perfectly illustrates it. And so one day I was 8 years old, and I was fighting, if you can imagine, a little 8-year-old kid fighting like almost every day, and just, you know, like just dumb, and you know, often getting bullied, but I hate to admit it, bullying too. I mean, that's how it works, right?
Mm,
And so one day I was fighting some kid in the schoolyard. I don't know, they attacked me or I attacked them, I'm not sure. And you know, my arms were just swinging, you know, and I wasn't a big kid, that's for sure. I'm still not. And I ended up accidentally, the principal came out to break us up, and she happened to get in the way of one of my fists. And I mean, I was only 8, so it's not like I was Mike Tyson, but I ended up punching her. It was accidental,
yeah.
but she was quite upset. You know, back in those days, you know, she grabbed me by the, you know, and yanked me, and took me to her office, sat me down, and said, "Abe, you're such a bad kid. One day you're going to go to prison." And you know, it's so funny, little 8-year-old kid, I could see myself, you know,
Yeah.
in the jumpsuit. And
Wow.
they didn't, back in those days, they didn't have the orange jumpsuits. You remember the ones with the black and white
Yep.
stripes, you know?
Yep. The
And I could see
cartoon
it.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny, right? And then I went home that day, and I told my mom this. And you know, my mom honestly was my biggest fan, and still is, I think, for sure, besides my wife. And I said, you know, how's school today? Now I got another fight, and principal told me I'm going to go to prison today, mom. And you know what she said? And she wasn't a spiritual person really at that time. She wasn't like a faith person or religious, but she said, you know what, Abe, God's given you a lot of energy, and you're a good boy. One day, God's going to use that energy for good. And that was it. And as soon as she said that, I could see another path, and it
Mm,
was a path of me helping people. And I didn't even know what helping people was, because I had never been exposed to that environment, but I could see it. at least as much as I had the understanding at the time.
Yeah.
And so my whole life has been, in a lot of ways, about choosing a path. And, interestingly, the only way, making the choices is just the first step, because then you have to reinforce that choice and make it over and over again every day. And the only way you do that, like the reason I had all those M's is because it's actually what I do. So I manage my mindset. So every day I'm examining, how's my mindset doing? Where are the areas where my thinking may have been unhealthy or toxic yesterday? How am I going to, support healthy thinking today? Where's my motivation? Because motivation is fuel. It's your why. And so every day I want to just recalibrate. Why am I doing this? Like it gets tiring sometimes. It gets exhausting. Grinding out a business, it's hard work. But every time I tap into my why, it's like filling my tank up with gas. And then I think, on a practical level for people, like, I mean, this is the most practical, is manage your mantras, and that is, what are you saying? I can't change the story about myself until I start speaking it over myself. And it could be just as simple as every day, a simple mantra that says, I've got this. And
Yeah.
then pretty soon you evolve to, I am precious, I am valuable, I am worthwhile, I have everything I need, I can do all things. That kind of a mindset shift that occurs. And what happens is I start then targeting mantras to my area of need. So if I feel like, man, I got a poverty mindset, well, then I start sharing a mantra. I'm a money magnet. Abundance is attracted to me, right? I generate growth. I generate wealth in every area. If I struggle with relationships, then I start to use a mantra. I'm loving, I'm kind, I'm patient. People want to be around me. And I think, that might seem crazy, but I would rather, people say, oh, you're just talking to yourself. Well, hey, people are talking to themselves all the time.
Yep.
Why not just take advantage of that process and use it? And, no better example of that than Muhammad Ali, who, called himself the greatest before he actually was. I mean, he was 18-year-old, kid in a gym working out, boxing, and called himself the greatest in the world. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? He became the greatest, and it started in his mind and in his mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of just like the messaging that you put into your brain is just so key. And how incredible that your mom, going through everything that she was going through at that time, was still able to plant such a positive seed to really like kind of jolt you to see another path.
It's amazing. I mean, like I say, I learned resilience just by watching it, and by
Yeah.
hanging out with her. And you know what? I mean, that takes us to another sort of concept, and that is, as parents, as coaches, as just community leaders, as social media influencers, as anyone engaging, like, there's power in your words. You have no idea, right? The ripple effect of the words that you speak. And I think that a lot of people just say, well, I've only got 1,000 followers, or I'm not a big person, or whatever. Listen, it's not about, having thousands of followers. It's about leveraging the opportunity that you have to speak positive into people's lives. And so, for me, not only was she a great example of resilience, but also a great example of leadership. Because every day leaders are faced with a problem, oh, here's a tough economy, or here's a high inflation environment, or here's low sales, or here's underperforming workers. And, oh, you're going to go to prison one day. And you can either say, yep, you are, or you can say, hey, how can we speak something different and model something different for the people who are on our team?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's you who has to choose which voice you listen to, right?
Right on.
Yeah. Yeah, and another big thing that I talk about a lot too is just self-talk, right? That's, for example, like you get a teacher like that nowadays. If a teacher said something like that, nobody would stand for it. Like
Yeah.
you would immediately like probably go home and like tell your mom, and your mom would probably march down there and like tell that teacher, you can't talk to my son that way, or maybe not. But at the end of the day, like, why are we letting ourselves off the hook the same way? Because we
It's
would
crazy.
tell ourselves the same thing. I'm such a bad kid. I'm probably gonna end up in jail one day. It's like that ability to check that, like you were saying, and almost like create a mantra now that's the opposite of that, and realize like, hey, I've got this negative cycle thought that's going through my head constantly. I need to counter that thought.
Yes, I can't agree more. And there's very little distinction, right, between self-talk and mantras.
Yeah.
And I think, at the end of the day, people will try to hijack your destiny with their words. Well, you guess what? You can capture your destiny with your words.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. You like you have obviously had this incredible transformation. Have you I imagine you've been a part of some pretty incredible transformations that you've played a role in other people's lives with as well. Are you able to share any that stand out to you for the listeners?
Yeah, I would. I mean, the ones that really resonate the most for me, especially, I mean, there's been so many, but I guess I could focus just on one subset, and that is, the group of people who, have this dream and have this destiny to build a business, to be a coach, to be a speaker, to have an impact. And based on how we teach them and work with them and coach them, they're able to actually build an explosive environment. So I've got a couple of members of our team, and of course, it won't share their name, but just when they came, they were great speakers, they were great coaches, but they never figured out how to monetize
Hmm.
the gifts and the talents that they had, and so they were living, not only not making any money, but actually they weren't flourishing and thriving, because if you're always chasing after dollars, it's a pretty exhausting way to live. And so we started to go to work on that mindset, shifting that mindset to, from sort of poverty to abundance, to this idea that I have inside of me all of the tools that I need to be successful in my business, and to see the absolute transformation, the capacity. I remember, helping one in particular get her first $5,000 month, and then her first $10,000 month, and then her first $20,000 month. And those might seem like they're big or small numbers depending on the listener, but it's not about the number, it's about the breakthrough mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And then to see it sustained, right? Because that breakthrough, just happening 1 month, well, hey, your bills are covered this month, but what about next? And so, I love this approach because it allows people to take whatever challenge they're facing and begin to move from languishing to flourishing through utilizing just a few simple steps that we teach them. And of course, just like a personal trainer, having that consistency to get that mind muscle going is the critical key that unlocks all those doors.
Yeah. Yeah, powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. What kind of impact does you surround yourself with such an incredible community as well? People who are just appear to be so positive and uplifting. How important is that when not only trying to create change, but also when managing that change? There's that M word again. But when you're looking to manage that change, you're looking to create that change, what's the role of community to you?
Well, I mean, it's like literally scientifically not possible to flourish or have mental health by yourself. It's just not possible. So when that's your starting point, that changes everything. So, for me, my starting point was the opposite. I learned independence. I had learned independence because no one that I relied on growing up was reliable. And
Mm-hmm.
though my mom was incredible, there were other areas where, I had to rely on myself. And so part of what led to my crash, the crash of my marriage in my early 30s, was I started to have problems, but I didn't have anyone to reach out to.
Mm.
And so, I mean, that wasn't their fault, that was mine. I had isolated myself. So
Yeah.
what I've discovered is we flourish in community. And I think in terms of helping people to have breakthroughs as a coach, what I recognize is that I can give, or a teacher, something to somebody that they need. But me as a great coach or great teacher by myself is not going to be part of the transformational journey all on its own. We have to support it. And so it was actually right around the start of the pandemic. And we started doing a whole bunch of work around mental health, workplace mental health with small business owners and entrepreneurs, because their mental health took a huge hit. And we did it all for free. And we and that was amazing. We had people lining up trying to pay us, and we wouldn't take their money for about 8 months. And part of the reasons for that was right at the start of the pandemic, I just had this little word dropped in my spirit, and it was like, stop selling products, start building community. And when we made that shift, it was just amazing what happened on the sales side when we finally let it months later. But what I realized was that, hey, the worst things that have happened to me in my life have come through other people. But the best things in my life that have happened have come through other people. So I just got to make sure I get around the right people because the wrong people will do you harm, but the right people, man, they'll change your life. It's amazing what the right people can do for you.
Yeah. And there's so much out there for people to get connected with, right? Like,
Yeah,
especially in today's day, like joining a Facebook group that's free and filled with people who are posting just positive things. Like it really can be as simple as that, right? And
totally.
you kind of
that's a beautiful starting place, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If somebody's an introvert or feeling very isolated and stuff, it's a very easy starting place because you don't really have to put yourself out there that much, right?
Right on.
You touched as well on just like the role of a coach, and I think that's a good place where we could start to wrap things up here. Maybe is just, in your opinion, what do you think is the biggest role for the coach in that, as like the coach being kind of the leader of that community in most cases? What's the role of the coach?
Yeah, I think a huge part of the role of the coach is to facilitate or support a breakthrough in others. And I can't make the breakthrough happen. I can't engineer it, but what I can do is create an environment where it's far likelier that it will occur, both by the safety that I create for people, because people don't grow until they feel safe, but secondly, by the types of questions that I ask, by the way I engage with people. And when you start to facilitate breakthrough, people's lives get transformed, and then the community grows. And then what's so great is people start giving that gift to each other. And that's what allows that community to truly thrive. And so that's, in my view, the role of a coach.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's that ability to facilitate that change. And I think what you said that really resonates with me is like asking the right questions that help guide people to it in a way that they're still empowered to do it, right?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Before we do wrap up, where can people find you? And is there anything that you really want people to know that we haven't had a chance to say yet?
Hey, just if you're out there and you're looking for an evidence-based model for coaching around the science of flourishing, reach out. We have partnered with PhD psychologists and really well-qualified, high-level people to build a model that is awesome. They can find us and myself. You can go to the World Wide Web. Our website is pretty simple. It's certifiedflourishingcoach.com. And then on Facebook, you can find me. I'm pretty easy, just Abe Brown. And that's the name of my business page. And, I do a lot of my own posting there. And then, of course, online, if you're interested in our program, certifiedflourishingcoach.com is a great place to go.
Awesome. Anything that hasn't been said that you'd like to make sure gets out to the people?
No, hey, I'm just excited you're doing this, Kyle. You're doing great. I follow you too, and it's awesome to see the impact that you're having. So I commend you. Well done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I send it back to you as well. Very much likewise. Go check out Abe. We'll include the links in our show notes, so if you're looking for it, that's where you can find it easily. Thanks again so much for being here, Abe. This was fun, and there's so much more that we could have gotten into. So maybe we'll have to do it again another time.
All right, Kyle. Thanks so much. Next time, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. For additional support or to work with one of us one-on-one, go to our website, www.wellnessdojo.ca. You can also find us on Instagram at Wellness Dojo YYC, or on all other social media platforms searching The Wellness Dojo. We'll see you in the next episode.